Hello and welcome to the stream. I'm Matthew, co-host of the Effect podcast, and I have to apologise, Christopher, straight away because Dave's wife has got him in a trap, and there is a hammer in a very precarious position if he dared to do any more gaming this evening. So he can't do anything gaming related, and he's had to send his apologies to this interview, but he would be here. He was very eager to talk to you. And our guest is Christopher Gray. Say hi, Christopher.
Hi, Christopher. Oh, I loved it already.
Now, it's very exciting because I think you are about, well, you've started Kickstarting, you've raised the money, so it's going to happen anyway. But this is the first free, non-free league Year Zero engine game that I think has appeared on Kickstarter.
Is that true? I'm surprised to hear that. I was a little surprised to see that the SRD even existed.
Well,
so
I
maybe
can tell you a
it's
little
not
bit about that because that was my idea. I suggested it as a stretch goal for Forbidden Lands, and they went with it. Although it's not an SRD, actually, I noticed you've linked to somebody putting it up and calling it an SRD. There is a document floating around, but haven't quite made it into a sort of web SRD. I don't know quite why yet, but yeah. But yeah, the OGL exists with all the boilerplate and stuff. And I think you are the first person. I think there are a few other games I've seen released. I think there are some on Drive-Thru RPG and things like that are available, shall we say, but none have been kickstarted. So I think you might well have the honor of being the first Kickstarter.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm gonna broadcast that. That's great.
And so I want to talk more about that. Obviously, that's the main reason you're on here. But we always ask all our guests who are with us for the first time, at least, to introduce themselves a little bit. Now, I've heard you on Happy Jack's RPG podcast, which for any of our listeners who aren't already listening to Happy Jack's RPG podcast, it's great. It was my very first RPG podcast at a time when I wasn't there. Feels a lot like people sitting around a table in the pub having a good old chat. So I really enjoy it. Anyway, I've heard you there. I know a little bit about some of your history, but we always ask all our guests, tell us about your life in gaming.
Yeah, that is a big question. And yes, do hang out with the Happy Jacks folks. They are good folk. And I've had the pleasure of sitting at their tables for a number of years, and I've definitely enjoyed them and their podcast. I guess it started earlier than I can remember, really. And I know that sounds trite, but it's kind of true. Like, I don't really remember my first game. It just feels like I've always been doing it. And that would have been in the early 90s. It was a second edition D&D, I think, was the game that I really got in on. And then after that, went through a bad period of too many Rifts games. But I was actually designing my own games back in high school, and for my friends, and I never really took it seriously beyond that. But it was all homebrew all through college, and it was basically a space opera setting that we used to play in, and that was really it. I ended up after college kind of distancing myself from the role-playing game world because there weren't anybody around me that would play. So I ended up in MMOs a lot for a long time. I actually got back into games back in when 5th edition was announced. And I did that because I wanted my kid, who then I think was, I don't really remember, I think he was 6 or 7. I wanted him to get into tabletop. So, and then once I realized all that I had missed in that period, I just kind of dove in and really enjoyed the indie market and started writing right away. Published the Happiest Apocalypse on Earth was my first real game out in the market.
Yeah. Now, I heard about you talking about that as it was kind of happening on Happy Jack. So shows you how long ago that was, actually.
I guess I should put a number on it. I really, the years have all blended together, so I really can't say. But it was a few years ago. It must have been about 4 years ago. And yeah, that was sort of in the first wave of PBTA. I think on the tail end of the first wave. Mm-hmm. And so I got in there, actually was introduced to the system through Dave Kazay, who's also on the Happy Jacks crowd, when he was doing Bedlam Hall, which is now kind of an old title too. But that's how I even learned about it. And then Dave helped me with the first game. And that was a blast. And that's still around. And in fact, I'm probably going to be updating it soon because it feels a little dusty.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, that was first. And then after that was Great American Novel, which was my attempt at creating a framework for story-driven games.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that chassis, I created The Great American Witch, which is my most recent, and now into Temples and Tombs.
The Great American Witch seems to have really caught the imagination, or maybe I'm just listening to too many people within the circle of the Happy Jacks crew, but there seem to be a lot of people playing it. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
I'm happy to hear that. That was the intent, not really because I want to sell games, which I do, but because I was trying to create an alternative to World of Darkness. I love World of Darkness. I played Werewolf back in the 90s and Vampire and all the rest, and even played a bit of the 5th edition Vampire. Chronicles of Darkness, the whole list goes on. But I was trying to find a game that really wasn't about self-destruction and some of the darker themes of those games. And also there's sort of a male power fantasy that is ubiquitous in those games, and that's fine. I like playing them, but I wanted an alternative. And so one of the design goals for Witch was that it could be a game that would have the same kind of breadth as the World of Darkness games. And I do intend to create more designs in that under that banner. In fact, working on one as we speak. I plan on developing in that setting for quite some time for that reason. So I hope it is catching on. I mean, that was the idea.
And that was based, as you say, on the framework of the Great American Novel. And that itself is a kind of PBTA game. Is that fair to say?
It's fair. If I were a PBTA player and I got the game thinking it was a PBTA game, I might be a little surprised or disappointed. There's enough deviation in the system that it's not definitely. I have a hard time categorizing it there. I think it came from that mindset though, and the system is way more interested in character choices and motivations than in plot. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the big deviations from PBTA is that PBTA will drive the plot with the moves and the game, whereas in Great American Novel, that's not really the case. It's the choices that you make and your motivations that drive the game, not necessarily the moves. Yeah, so there is a big deviance there.
Excellent. Okay, so you've had three successes, because I think there's a lot of people that love The Greatest Apocalypse on Earth. Not necessarily Disney, I understand. They're not massive fans.
It could be. I don't know. Maybe they love it. Actually, I've had a lot of people who work for Disney parks write me and say they just love the game because it came from my love for Disney parks. That you can definitely see it in there.
But you've got so those are three kind of PBTA games. You've pushed the limits of PBTA. But you're working, that's a medium you're happy with, and with the Great American Novel, you could almost do everything. So why did you decide to look at Year Zero for Temples and Tombs? I ought to put let's put the banner up for Temples and Tombs there.
There it is. Robbie Bear's art. He's so great.
So what made you come to the Year Zero system?
It's a really good question. I did create a framework so that I would have to, not stop. I wouldn't need to ship other systems into my ideas, and so that was the whole point. But then, really, the Great American Novel chassis is for a particular experience. It's meant to create literary games that are way more interested in characters and their motivations. Temples and Tombs is really trying to emulate the Indiana Jones movie or the Mummy movie, and that cares way less about characters and more about plot. So the system doesn't work. It's too slow moving. It's too thoughtful, and it doesn't lend itself to action. So I needed something that was very good at action and what I like to call latency. I actually borrowed this from Misdirected Mark in their podcast when they do a lot of deep dives into game design. And I agree with their usage of the word latency, which is the idea of how much time does it take before you drop the dice and the story moves. So what is that adjudication process? Is there a long time or not? And with Witch and Novel, the latency is pretty high. because you have to make decisions about the overall story and your character, and there's some discussion and give and take between the guide and the players. So that wouldn't work in an action game. So Year Zero is my favorite system out there, and that was the first one that I came to. And I knew that some of the innovations I saw in Alien were going to work really well here. And I also knew that the way that Tales from the Loop handled harm was going to work here, because for reasons we can get into, but the system was resilient enough to handle the adaptations I wanted to make, and it was also fast and easy to pick up.
Those are really good reasons. Let's just backtrack a bit. If you said that it's your favorite system out there, which is the answer I really wanted, but you gave me a far more intellectual answer as well, which is great. But Thomas and I were discussing this a little bit beforehand, and I said, well, all you need to say is it's because it's the best. But no, you're giving us a proper reason as well. But so within the published games from Free League, you mentioned Alien already and Tales from the Loop. Have you played any of the other ones?
Forbidden Lands is a kick in the pants. I love that game. Yeah. And then Basin. I have only played one session of Basin, so I'm not as immersed in it as I want to be. But that's the game I want to campaign, and I just haven't gotten my group away from Great American Witch long enough to play Basin.
Yeah, that's your problem for making a really good game. We're getting into the technical questions now, because there are some, I've only kind of read the rules. I haven't played it yet, but I tell you what, I really want to play it now, and that wasn't the intent. It was the intention to play it sometime, but I want to play it this week now and see if we could stream a show and get people to see it in action as well. It really wants you to play it. I mean, yeah, it's marvelous. But there are some differences, and I wanted to talk through some of those differences and some of the ways you're playing it. So let's deal with the harm first of all. Harm, of course, is very much a PBTA term. But what you're avoiding here is actual damage. The damage you get when you take catches, I think you call it. A catch is a little bit like I can't think what they're called in Tales from the Loop.
Conditions, I think.
Conditions, yeah.
I might be pulling from.
No, you're right. It's conditions there, and it's conditions as well in Vaesen. And there's a big difference between the ones in Vaesen and the ones in Tales from the Loop, which are the Vaesen ones are kind of damagey, either mental damage or physical damage. And the ones from Tales of the Loop are basically wanting to go home to mum or to whoever your carer is, and play a scene out where you're eating soup or something like that to get back into power. So this veers more in that direction, but in a pulpy sort of way. Can you tell us a bit more about your catches?
Yeah, and it's catch because we're trying to get the lingo out of formality, because this is pulp, and so hey, what's the catch? And that's the idea. But the mechanic is really about emulating what happens in these action movies. And you have heroes, and no matter what happens to them, they never actually get really hurt. They never
get bruises, cuts on the face, but not really hurt.
It's all very cosmetic, and you can even take bullets to the arm and you're fine. The worst thing that happens is that maybe you're out of the scene, but you're back in the next scene, just like nothing happened. And so that kind of thing, you really can't track damage if that's what you're going for, because at some point your character will get hurt and die. Well, that can't happen in this game. So I took from Tales from the Loop, which is the same idea, because you can't kill kids. And so it was part of that design to make sure that the kids get consequences without actually hurting them. And so I really just borrowed that, but then I made it more cinematic. So the idea is if you play Tales from the Loop, that when you sustain conditions, and those conditions sort of stack, that you might be afraid, or I forget what they are offhand, but they'll stack up. In this game, the conditions, or as they're called, catches, happen in the moment in the action. So it'll be something like a flipped script. So that moment in Temple of Doom when Indiana Jones is running after the bad guy, and then the very next moment he's running back and the bad guys are chasing him. He rolled poorly. That was a flipped script catch, and that will still deduct from your dice pool, but it's not going to remain as a narrative situation like it would a condition. It's just in that moment it was flipped, and there are several of those, but they're cinematic. Something has to happen to make your character fumble or stumble or do that thing that happens in pulp movies where things just go wrong.
I'm just looking for my catches notes. I made some notes here on catches and I've just lost them. Give me a moment. So yeah, you and you do have, I guess, if there's that point where the story is, has led to you being shot in the arm or something, and you've had all your other catches, then you could say, I've got to spend the night in hospital, and it takes you out of that scene and restart the story in the next morning.
Yeah, really the last option is that you must be saved. Because that happens in the movies too. There's always that moment like there is no way, Brendan Fraser is going to get out of this. And so that's the moment that somebody comes in and saves him, and if that can't happen, then yeah, out of the scene. Maybe Brendan fell into a river and is now going to get picked up later in the next scene. But yeah, that's sort of a last resort.
Gotcha. And now you mentioned that you keep, although the narrative doesn't turn into a long chase sequence or something if you flip the script, you do have that negative on your dice.
Right.
And that's on all your rolls from now on, is it?
That's right, until you can rest. And rests are snappier. I mean, a rest might be something that happens during combat. If you just spend a moment just to catch your breath, you can clear a catch. And once you've done that, then it takes longer and longer. And there's also talents and things that people can do to help clear those catches.
Excellent. Now the other big sort of modification, and I can see where it comes from, and that's luck, which is very similar, but also very different to stress in the Alien game. So can you tell me more about how luck works?
Yeah, I loved that mechanic at Alien. That just made me smile. So it reminded me a lot of one of the things that I liked about I've forgotten the game, so maybe I'll move on. Oh, the 5th edition Vampire kind of does this too with blood dice, if you're familiar with that. Yeah. I just love the idea. However, I think it applies not as stress, but as luck in a pulp game, because you are pushing your luck essentially every time that happens. And so you accrue luck, just like you would stress. And then just like stress, there are things that can clear that tracker. But whenever you accrue it, you're adding dice to the pool. And then when the dice hit 1, boom, you're out of luck. And then something happens in the narrative to demonstrate that. So yeah, and luck also plays into other aspects that I think are a little unique to what the other Free League games do. And one of those is almost using luck as a talent barter for some classes. Like, for example, if I'm a soldier, I don't need to roll my luck dice if I'm getting shot at, because that's just something I know how to do.
Yeah.
So there's sort of variance in how the luck dice work, but yeah, that's a general idea. Then there's another element to them, is using them as, and I pulled this one from Call of Cthulhu, but using the luck as its own sort of attribute. Mm-hmm. So when you've accrued luck, let's say you have 3 luck because some things have gone that way, you can actually roll those 3 luck if you want something to happen in the narrative. Like whenever a player looks up and says, well, is there a rope bridge across this gorge? I don't know.
Accrued luck.
Yeah, roll luck is C. And if you botch it, then you're out of luck. And no, definitely not. And by the way, there are crocodiles down there. So, but yeah, that was a lot of fun, I think, putting that luck mechanic in there.
Brilliant. No, I really like that. You made some other changes as well. I'm going to have to bring my lawyers in on a couple of those changes, and that's on the stats, because my co-host and I have been working on a Western themed game for over a year, and we've got grit and we've got quick, and they're ours. But you've changed those stats around, and I'll forgive you, grit and quick, because your mental stats, as it were, are very different from ours. And they're wits, and they're also style, which when I first read it, I thought, I don't remember pulp being immensely stylish. Some places are immensely stylish, like Obi-Wan's in Singapore, for example, in the second Indiana Jones movie. But style, is it about saving your hat? Can you tell us a bit more about style?
Yeah, the style is, the Harrison Ford aspect of your character. And it's really what we're talking about are social skills. So these are, the skills that are associated with them are sway, scare, and trick. But it's that quite kind of immeasurable quality of your character to be able to influence other people. And that could be, because of your fashion, because of your posture, because of your presence. And that's definitely there in the pulp genre. That's a big deal. I mean, what is your ability to, what's that cockeyed smile you get that convinces the other person to do something that you want?
Yeah. I just got to go back to luck, though, because one of our viewers has asked us a question about that. And I don't know the answer to this. Do NPCs have luck as well? Can the villain use luck to escape?
Yes. However, there's tiers of villains. I mean, you're going to have your base sort of lackey or grunt or goon that just has one catch, and that is, in the scene or not after they get hit or whatever. But then you have more complex, harder, boss style characters, and they have all of the same mechanics that a player character would, and they have luck, and they also have catches. So the more catches they have and the more luck they have, the harder they are. Also, the beasts and some of the bigger ones will have, sort of like an alien does, where this, if they hit, this is what they do.
Right. Yes. So that random attack sort of thing that
right.
people love with Alien.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, if we and I haven't announced it yet, so you're the first to hear this.
Ooh, it's a scoop.
We're hitting 10,000, and that I've already agreed to do another adventure, which is great. But I was trying to figure out what to do for the 15,000, and I'm going to announce on 15,000 that we're going to blow that out a bit, because right now it's sort of a toolkit where you can kind of engineer your own bad guys and monsters and beasts. But now I'm going to go ahead and just do. Here are some monsters, beasts, and bad guys and organizations, and do a good 20 pages of that, just so that you can have those cool moves in there,
I've got to say, moving on to, there's, I think, one more thing I want to talk about before, but since we brought up the toolkits, I'm loving your adventure toolkit at the end, which again, you see varieties of this in most of the Free League games, some D66 tables to say, who's your client, what's your mission, where is it, sort of thing, what's the reward. But you've got some great advice on creating stories. So what is your MacGuffin? Don't let me explain it. You tell us. You've got MacGuffins, you've got locations, and I just love some of the examples of those.
Yeah, the idea is to put hard scene frames in this, which is missing in Free League, but it's pretty common in PBTA and Protocol and some of the indie games, where you don't just play the game, you play within a certain a boundary or limitation. So like this is this kind of scene, this is that kind of scene, and it sort of keeps everybody on the same page on what to get out of that moment. I do it a lot, and Witch is actually really great for this as a game. So I kind of just took what worked in Witch and put it in here, and that was the idea that we're not just going to jump in and play. We're going to start with a cold open, because that's how these movies work. You're in the middle of an action scene, something is chasing you, something went wrong, go. And this is full narrative control for the players to introduce their characters and how they handle it, but completely unrelated to the adventure of the day. And then you go into you need to, when you're building the adventure, you have to decide the MacGuffin, and there's a bunch of tables for that, but there has to be something that you're after. And then you define your set pieces that you want to use, and set pieces are called that so that we get away from the idea of, we need to be in a location, and we need to be in a really cool, interesting location. Why be in a shopping mall in suburbia when you can be in a bazaar in the Middle East, and try to make it more cinematic. And then there are the threats that are after the MacGuffin. There are threats that are after you. So there's a race to get to that, and then there's what's called the dungeon, which is where the MacGuffin is being held, and where the final act will take place. And it has to be in a place that is big enough for a huge chase or a getaway. So yeah, those are kind of, and then you frame it into scenes on top of that, or chapters, or however you want to phrase it. And then you can kind of create the flow so there's a beginning, a middle, and end, and it always wraps up in the same way.
So it feels to me like it's a really good toolkit for making adventures, even, beginning GM. And I just want to go back actually to something you said quite early on in the book about why you'd chosen Free League, the Year Zero system. And one of the things you say is it's an accessible system, and I really think it is. But a toolkit like this at the end of it makes it really accessible. I feel like I could give it to a kid and they could build an adventure. I mean, my boy, when he was young, he loved Indiana Jones. We had an Indiana Jones birthday party when he was 5, I think. And yeah, I'm sure he would have leapt into this very quickly. He's upstairs playing Blades in the Dark now, so I'm not sure whether I can sell him on any Free League games yet, but there we go. Yeah, that it's very accessible toolkit, but you also give us adventures. There's a great sort of introductory adventure in the beta, and I have to say to everybody, if you back this Kickstarter at any level, if you go to the first update, you can download a pretty full version of this game, your beta rules, which is where the artwork on our screen comes from. And there's a really good sample adventure there, which I really want to play. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, particularly my players. You've already mentioned that you're going to have another adventure coming out, and there was one at the Yoke Island one, which I've got to say I love, and I want to talk a little bit about Imperialism in a moment.
Definitely want to address that.
But I love the Oak Island, the idea of the Oak Island one, so I'm very keen to see what that one's all about. But we have got a question from one of our viewers, which I think is pertinent here. Will you be continuing to bring out more published adventures for this on a regular basis, or a long campaign?
Definitely. One thing I've learned from marketing is that more content is always good. but just logistically, I have tons of ideas, and I would like to see a larger campaign to see how it works. I mean, I haven't done a large campaign with this. It's always been very serialized, different moment and different campaign, one shot oriented. Although it could do a campaign. So that would be something I'd be interested in producing for sure. I'm
really interested to see that. We're sorry, I just have to plug something else we're doing. So Alien, of course, is very much everybody's enjoyed the cinematic scenarios, the one-off scenarios. They said it can work for campaign play as well, but I've not really seen many campaigns out there. So we're trying a sort of colonial campaign ourselves. And viewers, it's starting this coming Thursday, everybody, for the first adventure. We had session 0 a couple of weeks ago, but we're going to be trying that campaign thing there. I'd love to see how a campaign would work with these rules as well. So that's good to go. Randy, you've got your answer there. So, Imperialism.
Yes, this is a good topic for this genre.
Yeah, so you write a little bit about the 30s, and you say one of the reasons why the 30s is good is because the imperialism is declining. And I thought, as I read that paragraph, I thought, yeah, that's kind of brushing it under the carpet a bit, because, speaking as one of those declining empires, we were still being pretty damn imperialist in most of the places. And frankly, just, walking in as a white guy into many of these places, you start dissecting Indiana Jones, indeed. And, particularly number 2, there's quite a lot of pretty heavy Orientalism there.
Definitely.
But then at the end of it, you say something which I love. And maybe I should let you put it in your own words now, but I can quote if you want.
I'm guessing the moment you're talking about, but yeah, we know better. We know better now, so we don't have to make stories like that anymore. And just to clarify, imperialism in the decline compared to what it was, the reason this period works for this genre is because we're in between world wars. There's still a lot of unknowns out there and areas of the world that are very inaccessible, and we don't have to worry yet about stepping into the middle of a war. But there's these imperialism themes that you really can't get away from when you're in this era. And it's sort of, going into either you're going into other people's places and stealing their things and put it in a museum after slaughtering them, or you are trying to save them in a way that they don't want to be or need to be saved, and completely oblivious to all of the cultural, historical nuances of that society. So the prescription is, don't do any of that. You don't have to use temples and tombs to be historically accurate. It's not. It's a genre. It's a feel. It's an experience. The adventures you design should not be about subjugating other populations, and they shouldn't be about stealing things and putting them in museums, even though that's the movie we saw. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the adventures we're putting forward aren't really like that at all.
So can you give us, without spoiling it, can you give us a little bit about your ideas for Oak Island? Because that one I haven't seen at all.
Well, that one is coming from Stacey Delaforno, who is writing that, and they have let me in on a bit, but I don't know the whole story yet. And there are lots of spoilers. In fact, they asked me to, is it all right to really talk about what the big reveal is in the description, because there's a big reveal. And I said, well, yeah, I guess we need to know what the reveal is to sell it. And that's that Shakespeare's works are in the island, and there's drama around that. And Oak Island, if you don't know, is it's a fascinating topic. I think there's an entire docuseries about it.
It's something I do know, but tell our viewers.
Yeah, it's a island off of Nova Scotia, and there was a couple of teenagers back in the late 1800s who found what appeared to be a burial site for treasure. And long story short, people have been trying to find that treasure over millions upon millions of dollars and decades, and it keeps flooding, and it's always been this big mystery of what's there.
So yeah, it feels very right for the genre, the treasure hunting genre, but it puts it firmly in almost an anti-imperialist stance, as it were, because here, if you do get the treasure, you're taking it off one of the old empires,
right?
Which is what excites me about it.
And even the Egyptian one that's in the game now that you have seen is about returning something and not about taking it.
Yeah, and I love that something as well. Again, I don't want to spoil it for my players until they're sitting at the table, but I just loved that something. I don't know. Is there such a thing? Is that something, or is that
no?
No.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. No, but that's the point. You can pull things from mythology and make them real. There's nothing to say you can't. No.
Yes. My friend Andy is still not getting it, but he is quoting at least. Nazis. While we're on the subject of imperialism, I was hoping there'd be more opportunities to punch Nazis in this game, being as that's something that your man in the fedora used to do. But there doesn't seem to be all that many Nazis. Are we going to have the Nazis at least in one of the adventures?
I don't see why not. If you're in 1937, Eastern Europe, you're going to run into Nazis. Yeah. That was a design choice. Trying to keep it as politically is the wrong word. Trying to keep it just as agnostic as possible, so that it can work in an evergreen way. Indiana Jones punched Nazis, and that's totally fine. The game can do that. But the set pieces, we're trying to get away from history a bit, and let's focus more on the experience of pulp. And that might be a more of a distant nod to some of the original pulp that came out in the magazines and whatnot, where it was always just something ridiculous happening somewhere ridiculous.
Yeah, Doc Savage and that sort of stuff.
Right.
I remember as well Robin Laws. People said, "Why aren't there any Nazis in Feng Shui?" And he'd made that very clear distinction, and that yes, they're a bad guy, but they actually come with a load of other baggage that I don't want to be part of my stories, even though you think it's quite a simplistic moral enemy to defeat. There's lots of really distasteful things that we don't want to have there. So
yeah, and especially with events and the world in recent years, there's a lot that you don't want to. this is raw right now for a lot of people, and this is supposed to be a romp, not dealing with major issues game. I have games that deal with major issues, but this is not one of them. And so I try to keep a lot of that out, just so that you can play the game without worrying about scraping off a scab that you're trying to deal with or trying to heal from.
Brilliant. And another backer who's obviously read the beta is asking a question that I don't necessarily know the answer to. So can you tell us, Christopher Gray, how you handle consent?
Player versus player, I assume they're talking about. The style one that we just talked about has these sort of influence skills. And the idea is that, you can influence people to do things because you charmed them or whatever it is. But we need to move away from the idea of because I rolled well, you have to do this thing.
Yeah.
And that goes for NPCs and for players, but mostly for players where, obviously NPCs are not going to do anything that they're not inclined to do. That you can't make them do something that they wouldn't do. But players get to ultimately decide whether or not their character will do that. The other games that I've designed, there's actually built-in mechanics for that. Like you get incentivized to go along with somebody if they beat you in a roll in some way. Year Zero doesn't really have a elegant way to do that.
No, I do find actually that's the clunkiest rule in the Year Zero system when it's a manipulation role. And it's something like they say, well, it's not mind control.
Yeah.
But either you have to do it, or you have to do it but ask for something in return, or you have to fight the person that's there. I thought, these are not the two responses you have. I mean, they are two of the responses one might have to being asked to do something they don't want to do, but it shouldn't be that binary effectively. And so how do you deal with it in this game?
Yeah, there's more work to be done on that. I don't think the solution that's in the game is very good, really, ultimately, because it is up to the player at that point. But the rule is it's up to the player, not up to you. What I mean by up to the player is up to if you roll dice against another player, you can't make that other player do anything with their character that they don't want to do. So right. You can use the dice. So I'll take the dice under advisement with making my decision.
Right. Okay. Thomas is actually saying that's not what he was asking about.
Oh, okay.
And he was talking about safety, which
safety.
Those safety rules, which seeing those on like page 2 made me think, oh no, I mean we talk about this sort of stuff on the podcast. We've talked about it before, but we haven't actually put that into our beta rule set for Tales of the Old West. So yeah, you've made it very clear. You're talking about lines and veils.
Right.
You're saying the GM should be responsible for asking everybody, to write on a piece of paper, not publicly.
Right. Yeah. And this is pulled from my other games. I always have it front and center. My other games tend to deal with topics that are difficult. And Temples and Tombs is different. And when we talk about imperialism, we talked about, this is an era of misogyny. This is an era of racism. This is all kinds of, I try to make clear in the game that we don't play those. We don't have to, shouldn't, this isn't about that. There are games that deal with racism and misogyny really well. And if you want to explore those themes, play those games. Bluebeard's Bride is great. If you want to understand misogyny, play it all day, but that's not Temples and Tombs. So the safety rules are designed to, in addition to that, set down what might be triggers for people. I jokingly put snakes in there as an example, but there might be something in a play experience that just isn't good for you. Like you don't want to deal with it. I don't really. I had people in my party that don't like spiders, don't want to deal with spiders. Okay, no spiders. Or it might be something more, terrible than that. They don't want any kind of sexual violence. Maybe it's no animals. In any of my games, all dogs have plot armor. I heard a dog, so whatever those might be, and you can just discreetly write them down. The director then takes them and has a master list for everybody. So, okay, these are the themes we're going to avoid or not have, and these are the themes that we can't have, but we don't need to spend a lot of time on it. We don't need our violence to be gratuitous, for example. And then that's all done before you start playing.
Yeah, I do remember I had a big argument with my co-host Dave when we were writing the adventures that eventually became the Hope's Last Day, the adventure in the Alien core book. Dave wanted to have somebody that had a dog that would bark at inopportune times, and in the end, they'd have to make a decision about killing the dog. And I said, "This is the first adventure that people are going to experience. You do not kill the dog." And we were running these at a convention. I said, we have no idea what's going, but basically they don't kill the dog in any movie, except for John Wick. But that's
Right.
that's the
But that was
motivating.
the whole thing, right? Yeah.
It's a really bad idea to kill dogs.
Right.
So yeah, I can understand that. But yeah, lines where you say, I just don't want to feature that. Veils as well, where we don't mind that sort of stuff. And that could be, as you said, even something like gun violence,
Right.
which a lot of people think is kind of the core of a role-playing game. If you can't get to shoot anybody, what are you going to do? But people might not want to be seen. They might be happy with that happening off screen, as it were, as it used to in loads of films once upon a time. So those are your veils, and then you've got that list of things to avoid, and then you also say back that up with the X card as well.
Yeah, and also use the X card. If you forgot to put something on the list, X, put it on the list. And so you're covered. And out of the gates before you even start.
Right. Okay. We're just convinced again. I'll just put this one up here. Axios is feeling very poor at the moment and not backing Kickstarters, but we're almost persuading him to do Rocketeer and Tales of the Gold Monkey, which are two great stories that I love that film, and I really love that TV series. So yeah, you can do those. Well, now let's ask Christopher, can you do those?
Definitely. You could do anything along those lines. I'm actually thinking about hacking it already to do kind of a Star Wars thing, because really there isn't much difference, is there?
No,
especially if you're doing Edge of the Empire, kind of like,
yeah,
post
I mean,
Jedi.
the people even look the same.
Right. So I think it's very versatile.
Yeah. No, it looks like a really lovely pulpy system. And I used to say that of the systems out there, Coriolis was the most pulpy. But actually, no, you've shown me what pulp is in this system and how to apply it. So I'm very impressed. I think let's talk a little bit about the Kickstarter. How well is it going now? You mentioned you're almost up to $15,000.
Well, it's up. It's going to hit 10, which is the first. I didn't go into this with any stretch goals, because I just, all I wanted to do was raise enough money to print the books. That was it. But suddenly it went past our goal, and so I had to think seriously about how to extend it. And we're so early in the process still. So I kind of think it could go to 15. So I need to come up with another stretch goal. But right now we're about to hit 10, which means we get a new adventure, which could be codenamed Dirigibles and Dinosaurs, because that's basically what it's going to be, an adventure about, going into the Lost Andes to find the lost world with your Zeppelin.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Can't beat that for a pulp adventure, can you?
Yeah. I think I saw a lot of pressure for that kind of story.
Potentially an auto gyro. I might go with an auto gyro instead of a Zeppelin, but that's a matter of personal choice.
Or a house tied to balloons.
So that's another stretch goal you've got there. This isn't as well in terms of a physical product. I must admit, I've only backed for PDF because I generally do from that might get shipped from America. Is there a physical product?
Yes, this is a digest size hardcover book. And Gallant Knights Publishing, we went into this wanting to do offset printing for domestic instead of print on demand, because we are both a little frustrated with not having games and cons and bookstores and things. And, with the pandemic hopefully wrapping up soon, we would like to have physical product. So we went in that with that in expectation of mind. But we are going to do print on demand through drive-through for international, just because the way shipping is these days, we can't predict, and it's just going to be too costly for people outside the U.S.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it that way, and there's a physical and there's also the PDF.
Excellent. Right. So PDF for me, but it'll be interesting. There'll be people on this side of the Atlantic who might well go for print on demand. But we've got, most of our listeners are actually over on your side of the Atlantic, so it'd be great that they can get a bookstore version. Friendly local gaming store version as well. Just another point on, here you are though bringing out the very first Year Zero engine game that isn't produced by Free League onto Kickstarter, and you're up against Free League doing their first game in quite a long while that isn't Year Zero system, and it's the One Ring, and it seems to be sucking up everybody's dollars.
I saw that hit, and I made an expletive as I looked at my phone. It was. I was expecting Zine Quest, and Alan at Gallant Knight and I kind of talked it over. I was like, well, okay, we're probably going to be absorbed a bit, but at the same time, I have a pipeline, so I didn't really want to delay it, and I was willing to have a smaller Kickstarter as a result. But then Free League comes out with One Ring, which I knew was coming, but I didn't know it was coming in February. And then in addition to that, Monty Cook put out a big 5th edition release, and then there was something else that hit. Oh, Pathfinder came out with their Savage World edition, and I was thinking of the Venn diagram. And I'm like, these are all of my audiences.
Yeah.
And then I have the indie crowd and Zine Quest, and I'm like, they're all being bombarded with the Kickstarter they were all waiting for. And then that's when I launched. That was,
well,
it's okay. It worked out.
Well, it seems to be working out now. One wonders how well it would have done if you'd hit a free window, or is there such a thing as a free window on Kickstarter now?
It used to be, but it's hard to judge anymore. I mean,
yeah.
It's really hard. I know that I had considered doing it in December, which would have been really odd, but I was looking ahead and thinking, well, everybody's home right now. Maybe they'd be more interested in crawling Kickstarter in a month when I normally wouldn't launch. But then I thought, no, I'll just do it in February, and here we are.
Yeah, well, there we go. Well, we're really pleased to have you on the program, and maybe we can have you back when some more of your adventures come out, or if you do that campaign.
Definitely.
It'd be great to talk to you. As I say, so we're streaming this right now. We're going to try and squeeze this into the podcast, which I think will be the first time we've done that. But I kind of feel it's important that all our Year Zero fan listeners get to hear about this, particularly when Free League are sucking up everybody's dollars with their.
Hey, they do good, and I just happy to see One Ring out there. I was a backer, very excited about that. I can't wait.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks very much for coming on the show at this short notice as well. But we hope to have you back some other time.
Happy to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll say goodbye to all our chums. Oh, no, there's one thing I need to ask you first.
Oh, sure.
What we often like to do is what we're trying to remember to do is ask our guests on the podcast to say the final line of our podcast. We always end the podcast with, "And may the icons bless your adventures," from Coriolis. So can I get you, before I quit, just so I've got it recorded somewhere, to say, "May the icons bless your adventures"?
May the icons bless your adventures.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye all.
Bye-bye.